No sound detected. You lie. Wow. Wow. Ghost. R.I.P. the beard. You know, she gets what she wants. That's all. So I live a life of having one and then not. All the time. I've grown accustomed to just not getting used to anything. Because the minute I get used to it, Kat would like to see something else. But it's her call. It's her face. You know, what do I care? Patricia. She's probably gonna yell at me now. Is what it is. Bobby Joe Good. That's a name. That's quite a name. Boo, Cat. Boo. She is the destroyer of the beard. I feel like the more things get crazy in culture, the more a beard is going to be required. It's going to become a requirement for men. It'll be the distinguishing factor, so you know who to trust. So she needs to get the smooth face in while she can. Soon there won't be no option. Hey, Scott. Labriso. Labriso. Oh, the TikTok names are wild. Long hair equals wisdom. Is that true? Lord help us, Tampa just got electricity. Wow. Was that just short of a week? Right? Is it Wednesday? Tuesday? Wednesday. You lost power? Or most of Florida lost power? Either way, very glad to hear it. That's a great thing. Electricity is one of those things I feel like you take for granted until you lose it. And then you're like, oh, wow. Everything in my life runs on electricity, which is terrifying to think about. Terrifying, terrifying deal. Dude, I'm balding too, so don't worry. The one thing I have going for me is a very thick, voluptuous beard. I am not doing great on the top of head situation. Time to grow out the sides and the back. There used to be a name for that. The reverse bowl. There was a name for it. Where you were bald in the middle, but just thick around the sides and in the back. It's like a no-top mullet. Electricity is the thin thread holding society together. It is. And it's something that causes me insane stress on a regular basis. Because what a tenuous thing. Same thing with like clean drinking water. We had, I don't know if y'all saw this, but last week there was an attack on apparently the biggest water utility company in the US, and where we live was one of the affected areas. We're on a well, so it didn't really matter, but that's horrifying. That is horrifying. Water and electricity. Food, obviously, but water and electricity. A couple days, an absolute catastrophe. Unimaginable catastrophe. Mystic, hello, hello. My son's birthday party is tonight, so I can't stay, but I want to say hi. You are lovely. Happy birthday to the small child. That's exciting. That's super exciting. My kid went to a birthday party today. Lots of birthdays in like September and October. This is a big birthday period right there. Wow. The TikTok names just do not disappoint. Absolutely insane. Yeah, happy birthday. Beautiful reason to not be here. I'm not even going to entertain that. All right, let me get rid of the music out of my ears so I don't lose my mind. Good stuff tonight, 29 and 30. And we are going to go through some of the things that we've been skipping so far, which are some names, meanings of names, and background around names, mostly because I kind of want to prove a point, but also because it's interesting and it's not aggressively boring, is the honest answer. Not a huge deal, but it's my birthday today too. Yo, I'm telling you, October is like birthday madness. Kat's birthday is October. My dad's birthday is in October. We just went to another kid's party. There are several other children in my kids' classes' parties. It's like October month. It's birthday month. October is birthday month, is what I meant to say. Okay, birthday stuff aside. Enjoy the kid's birthday. Have fun. Get the heck out of here. Jacob marries Lee and Rachel. And similar, I think it was last week, where I kind of like try to slow things down and be like, pay attention to if this sounds familiar or not. Can you draw any parallels between, I think it was last week, with what we're reading now to something we've read prior? This will be the same type of perspective as we read. Think of parallels. What we're reading now, does it relate to anything that we've read recently in this text? Because it does. Jacob marries Lee and Rachel. Dos. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the East, or the Easterners, depending on translation. Now, in Hebrew here, it's like a generic description of anywhere that is east of the promised land of Canaan. That's not clear in the text, but that's clear contextually. We know because of the Hebrew. So beyond the border of the Jordan River, that would be of the east, or would be the Easterners. It also occurs with respect to territories in other directions, but that are still outside of the line of Canaan. That is your surrounding line. Rodriguez, what's going on? The TikTok names are wild. They don't need to comment. Somebody said happy birthday on TikTok, by the way. Mystic. You're getting cross-platform happy birthday wishes. And Lord help us Tampa. Happy birthday. Anyways, that's the east. Verse 2. As he looked, he saw a well in the field, and beyond 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it. For out of that well, the flocks were watered. The stone on the well's mouth was large, and when all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and the water the sheep. And put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. Let me make this bigger. It's very small. Better. Put the stone back over the mouth of the well. Verse 4. Jacob said to them, my brothers, where do you come from? They said, we are from Haran. He said to them, do you know Laban or Laban? Who knows? The son of Nahor. They said, we know him. He said to them, is it well with him? They said, it is well. And see, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep. And so it begins with Rachel. In Hebrew, her name is also the word for a lamb. And we know this from other points in the Bible also. But it's conceptual wordplay, which is the first nail as we go through the rest of this. Because so many names in the Old Testament are just wordplay, which makes you wonder, and I feel like we've talked about it before, but it makes you wonder if it was actually the names of the people. Because from like a literary perspective, it would make sense and it would be pretty nice for the author to be able to do that for a number of different reasons. But also in reality, giving them those names would also make sense. So there's 2 trains of thought there. But this is the beginning of the wordplay of the names in this section. There's already been a ton of it throughout Genesis, but it begins again here. There's a conceptual wordplay here with her name being a lamb. And it is well, and see, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep. Verse 7, he said, behold, it is still high day. It is not time for the livestock to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go pasture them. But they said, we cannot until all the flocks are gathered together and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well. Then we will water the sheep. Verse 9, while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Being a keeper of the sheep, a keeper of the sheepers, was not a thing that women normally did. It wasn't a normal job for any women during this time, but especially, you could say, for an Israelite. That's why there's kind of explanation there of why she's coming, where she's coming, to add context, because otherwise this would be really odd to the reader of the time without context. Sheep or keeper. It's pretty good, right? It was pretty good. Everyone whose birthday is in the first few weeks of October, congrats on your parents. They had more fun on New Year's Eve than the rest of us. Is that what that is? Does the timing work out to New Year's? So Rachel is the keeper of the sheeper, but they do add the context. It's her father's sheep. So she is a shepherdess, but it's not her occupation, which is an important distinction for the time period. For us, who cares? Verse 10. Now, as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother. I just read that twice. No, they wrote it twice. And the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob came near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. They just had to say it that many times. Verse 11. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, escalated very quickly, and wept aloud. There is some argument here about what kind of kiss this was, because everybody, hey, King, what's going on? It's good to see you. Everybody kind of knows, like, in the ancient Eastern world, giving a kiss was a pretty normal thing. It's pretty average. And you read about it a good amount in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. So it spans a very large time span there. But due to the direct and immediate context, and then what we continue to get into later, there's also a decent case that Jacob just kind of couldn't contain himself and kissed Rachel in more of a romantic way. So he kissed Rachel and wept aloud. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. This is where you should feel some parallels coming, because this was the same thing that happened to Rebekah years prior when Abraham's servant visited Laban's house in search of a wife for Isaac, who was Jacob's father. This should be jiving, similar to several other points in Genesis, where we get a story and then we have a descendant from the story who basically has the same story with some little details here and there. And at times, to be frank, there were some large things that were different, but the general story is the same. It follows the same track. So this is one of those. Rebekah, who is Jacob's mother, was Laban's sister, but the story we're getting that parallel here as well. Rolling back a stone to water the sheep. Where have we seen that motif before? Right. There's so much of it. There's so much of this stuff, which is, I love it. It makes me happy. 13. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. There's another kiss, kind of proof of concept. It was a normal thing. The context is what makes Jacob's kiss to Rachel possibly different. So Laban kissed him. Jacob told Laban all these things, and Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him a month. Pay attention to the timings of things too, because some of them become, at least in part, important. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Talking about money. Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now Laban had two daughters. The name of the older was Leah, super important. Remember good old gracious Leah. And the name of the younger was Rachel. So we have Rachel and Leah, the daughters of Laban. Leah name-wise, we have no idea where this comes from. So this begins some of the boring but not boring explanation of names and the etymology of them. In Hebrew, there is no record of this. So who knows? It could have been something that was changed later and we all got stuck with it. Or we just don't have the information. There wasn't a good enough record. It wasn't paralleled anywhere early on. Who knows? Who knows? Namely, I see what you did there. And the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak. I want to read this because this was really well put together. If the Hebrew word used here is translated weak or dull, it may indicate a lack of brightness in her eyes. Lustrous or sparkling eyes were considered a striking sign of beauty. They're pulling verses from 1 Samuel 16 and from Song of Solomon 4:1, where you get a little bit of corroboration of that fact, that lustrous or sparkling eyes were considered a striking sign of beauty. On the other hand, if that Hebrew word is translated as delicate, tender, or lovely, it may indicate that she had one striking feature while Rachel had many. Either way, it doesn't change anything, but it's a good example, and the reason I wanted to read it was that it's a great example of how a lot of this stuff in Hebrew, shifting it to English, and oftentimes that's not even what we're doing. We're moving it from Hebrew to another language, oftentimes to a third language before English, but at least to one in the middle. But the problem between the Hebrew and the English oftentimes is that it's so largely contingent upon the direct and immediate context and the time. Otherwise, some things like this, they're almost antithetical to each other. This is not quite, but we're talking weak or dull is a possible translation, or delicate, tender, or lovely. Lovely versus weak, lovely versus dull, delicate versus dull. Like, it makes sense to a point, but it could, and oftentimes does, dramatically change the meaning of the sentence. So it's just hard. But Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. So Leah is who we're going to call the ugly one. And just for simplicity reasons, not because I'm an asshole. Leah is the ugly sister, just so we can all follow along. And Rachel is the pretty sister. That is not accurate, but it is what we're going to go with. I get weary from BLB. What? BLB? I'm going to have to sit on that for a minute. I had a hard time with an acronym from Kat earlier, so I'm sure it is me. I'm oblivious. 18. Jacob loved Rachel. So Jacob loves Rachel. Also important to know. We have Jacob, who is the bachelor. We have Leah, who is the ugly sister. We have Rachel, who's the beautiful sister. And Jacob loves Rachel. Shocking. And he said, Jacob, I will serve you 7 years. Jacob's service, this is important, is in exchange for, it's a bridal payment. It's in exchange for what would be the expected payment for the bride, because that is just how the world worked. I'm sorry that people don't like it. We're talking about a guy who's about to have 2 wives. We can talk about the realities of the situation. Actually, we'll come back to that. But just understand, I will serve you for 7 years. This is basically him paying the price for the bride. That's what it is. And then we'll add more context, and I'll explain as we get kind of deeper into it so that I'm not just going off the cuff. For your younger daughter, Rachel. So I will serve you 7 years. I will pay the bride price for your younger daughter, Rachel, for the pretty daughter. Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to any other man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love that he had for her. Rebekah had planned to send Jacob away in chapter 27, so a couple weeks ago, or maybe last week, had planned to send Jacob away for a few days, is what it reads in Hebrew. A few days. Here, we're seeing that at least what is being told to us is 7 years is passed. So is it an error? Did it just take a little bit longer, like 6 years and 300 some odd days longer than Rebecca had planned back in chapter 27? Who knows? But something to know is that Rebecca had said she would send Jacob away for a few days, chapter 27. And here we're learning it's been 7 years. So for 7 years, he served for Rachel, paid the bride price, and they seemed to be only but a few days because of the love he had for her. Maybe Rebecca was talking about what it would seem like because of how much love he would have for her. Total joke. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, that I may go into her, for my time is completed." That's exactly what it sounds like. And if it went over your head, I'm not going to explain it. Give me my wife. This is just kind of the way it was said. I feel like we talked about this last week too. There are different ways of saying what is happening in that sentence. This was just one way of saying them. This is it adds to the perspective that the woman had the status of a wife at this point. The status we know is a wife status because of Deuteronomy. It's in the law of what a wife is, or when the betrothed becomes a wife. We also know this from other texts outside of Christianity, outside of the Bible, just how cultures did this. So we know from Deuteronomy in the law that at this point she would become a wife, and that's why that language is being used. There are types of ratchets. Why don't they just say Jacob was shallow instead of saying she's ugly? Is that shallow? Is wanting a beautiful woman shallow? What if she was also smarter? We don't know. We don't know which one was smarter. We just know about their aesthetic appearance. What are we talking about? Ratchet straps. Did somebody talk? Her sister wore a ratchet. Okay, now I'm up to speed. Understood. Moving on. 22. So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. Celebration. Wedding celebration. But in the evening, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob. He took his daughter Leah. Pay attention. He took his daughter Leah, the ugly sister, for not being mean, just easy kid story time. The ugly sister brought her to Jacob, who was supposed to have who? Not Leah. And he went in to her, meaning Jacob then had relations with Leah, who is not the girl that he just spent 7 years working for. Jacob spent 7 years paying the price for Rachel, not Leah. And dad of the daughters snuck in Leah, ugly sister, into Jacob's bed, and Jacob made sweet love to Leah, who is the wrong sister. And the plot thickens. Also, please pay attention to the parallel, because we have seen this before. We have seen this before. Exactly this. Not exactly. It didn't include sex. But we've seen the old switcheroo. Joe, I think Lee is pronounced Leia. Google it. I believe there are 5 different ways to say it. So I just read things. Y'all should know this by now. I read them the way that I speak them the way that I read them, which is not always correct. So you guys just have to kind of deal with it. I feel like we've established this as a team, as a family unit. I guarantee you'll be able to find at least 3 different ways to say it. I am just going to say it however I read it in my head, because I did not learn by anything audio. I learned through reading, and that's why you guys are all well aware that I have terrible pronunciation, especially for names. And I feel like we've all accepted this, and we're all ready to move on. See, Patricia just gave an alternate way to say it. Leah. I'm just going to say whatever comes out, and I'll try to use both of those so that we're being fair. Men are allowed to want what they think is a beautiful woman. I'm not going to say what I want to say. Moving on. Okay, so the switcheroo. Does anybody remember where the last switcheroo was? I totally accept your pronunciation, Joe. They're terrible. I feel like we've all established this, and we all just need to be okay with it. You can correct me. I'm totally fine with it. But it doesn't guarantee that I will change the way I say it. because I've been reading these things, however they've happened in my head for so many years. It's just very unlikely that it's going to change, even if I fully agree with you and I know that I'm wrong. I'm just being honest, self-aware, very self-aware. But in the evening, he took his daughter Lee, again, the switcheroo, and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob had sex with Lee instead of Rachel. Switcheroo. This happened last week, maybe the week before. It happened within the past 2 weeks in our Genesis reading, the old switcheroo. Just if anybody remembers who was involved in that, say it, because I'm curious. 24. Laban, see, like this is a good example too. Laban. I looked for this one and I found 3 to 5 different ways to say it. So I said, forget it. I'm just going to say whatever pops in my head when I read it. So, and I feel like I've pronounced it 2 different ways already just this evening. Laban gave his female servant Zilpah, whichever pleases you, to his daughter Leah. There you go. There's one. To be her servant. This is important too, because there is a descriptive term here, female. Laban, daddy dearest, gave his female servant, Zilpah, I don't know what, to his daughter Lee to be her servant. Women had servants too. It was a thing. Just so we're all on the same page. 25, and in the morning, behold, it was Leah. I feel like I did both pronunciations. I feel very proud of myself right now. It was Leah. And Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Serve for how many years? For 7 years. 7 years. And then the dude pulled the old switcheroo. Ruth got it. Ruth said, Jacob reaped what he sowed for when he played the switcheroo with Esau for the blessing. Right. Isn't that funny? There's so many parallels in Genesis. More than anywhere else. There are so many parallels in Genesis. So it was Leah, whatever. Jacob had disguised himself, like Ruth said, to deceive his father. Now the same thing is happening to him. The irony. Sounds like karma. Did I not serve with you for Rachel 7 years? Why then have you deceived me? Laban said, it is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. So he duped him hard and for so long. What a long con. 7 years. This is from Logos as an explanation because I didn't know this. So this is really interesting. It is not the custom, or it is not so done in the beginning of 26. Other instances of the Hebrew phrase occur in contexts where the speaker expresses moral outrage. We get an example in Genesis chapter 34, which we'll talk about when we get there. There's another example in 2 Samuel 13. And there was one before in chapter 20 of Genesis. With this, Laban insinuates that he, not Jacob, is the one who has the right to be angry. Which I like, because it's a different perspective. It's a different way to look at it. And I just thought it was really interesting. He's insinuating that he, the dad, not Jacob, is the one who has the right to be angry. It is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Laban uses the same language, younger, that was used in chapter 25 with Jacob and Esau. There, the firstborn would serve the younger. If you remember that too, there was a little stanza, that reads like poetry. And right, you don't think about that. It's really interesting. Back in when we were dealing with this with Jacob and Esau, there was that little poem section, the stanza there, that talked about the older serving the younger. So it's twofold interesting because it parallels as it has been, but also the different perspective from that the father is giving, that Jacob has no right to be angry, that he has a right to be angry because it goes against their customs. I thought that was super interesting. Both of those things were very, very interesting. But it adds to this greater kind of just the reality that these stories parallel so tight. And that it makes you wonder, is that a divinity thing Or is this a later authorship thing? And are things being set in a certain manner? I'm not saying either is true. I'm saying there are things to think about. That is all. Verse 27. Complete the week. This is just the 7-day marriage celebration. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years. Another 7 years, 14 years total, to be clear, for those not good at math. Jacob did so and completed her week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. So now we are doubling up. Laban gave his female servant Bilhah, don't know, to his daughter Rachel to be her servant. So each daughter got a female servant of their own to enter into this marriage with the one male. So Jacob went in to Rachel also, made sweet, sweet love to her. And he loved Rachel more than Leah, whatever, and served Laban for another 7 years. So Jacob is putting in 14 years to marry 2 women, have 2 female servants under those women, and to have babies with both of them. Just as a synopsis, I suppose. Moving on. Are you reading the Bible? Yes, this is the Bible. It is Genesis 29:31 now. You should go to YouTube, though, because it is very lucky that I even saw you down there. Go to YouTube. I'll give you the name. There you go. Okay, Jacob's children. This is where things get even more interesting. Jacob loved Rachel more than L-word. L-word. When the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Now, I hate when it does this to me. Hold on. All right, so one of the things to remember is the what was the insinuation with being barren? There was something bad about being barren, a specific thing that they believed, and not just the Jews, but in other near ancient cultures. It was all the same. They all had a very similar view of what being barren was. You were cursed. Yeah, right. You were cursed. It was judgment. And it wasn't a passive thing. It was like, especially within the Jewish culture, because if you think about what the punishment for a woman was, leaving the garden, was painful childbirth. So then if you weren't even able to experience painful childbirth, something had to be seriously wrong with you, really wrong with you. And not passive, but active, meaning you experienced a divine judgment from God. That the inherited judgment that Eve received was not enough. You don't even get to experience painful childbirth. You get to experience nothing. You get no children, no possibility, no movement of your family, which was 1,000 times more important than it is today. Nobody cares today. It's all people cared about back then. So it was divine judgment, which was a super, super big deal. I want to move back, though, because I want to read this. When the Lord saw that Leah was hated, this is from Logos, too, because this was really interesting. The Hebrew word used here for hated also occurs in Deuteronomy 21:15 in a similar context where a man has 2 wives. Certain Bibles translate the latter occurrence unloved, but opt for hated, which they do here in the ESV. Unloved captures the intended meaning. Jacob does not have antipathy toward Leah. He simply prefers Rachel, the woman he labored for in both 7-year periods, which is another thing to keep in mind. He worked 14 years to marry just Rachel because he had no interest in marrying her sister. So he had to work 7 years to get tricked into Leah, and then another 7 years to get the one he actually wanted. But I thought that was interesting, that Leah was hated apparently is not a great translation, and unloved is a better translation. Because the intended meaning is that Jacob, he didn't hate her. She just wasn't what he wanted. She wasn't what he worked for. She wasn't the intended recipient of the marriage. King said, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a demon curse thing. Oh, the barren? Yeah. I mean, that's a fair way to look at it. Having children was an honor because if you didn't, your tree was finito. Yeah, right. Leah, Leah, Leah. It's I win. You know, it's the only way I can win. And Leah, Leah, Lee conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben. Now we're going to get into some of the name stuff, so bear with me. Reuben. This name is a combination of two Hebrew words meaning see exclamation, a son exclamation. Reuben. For she said, because the Lord has looked upon my affliction, for now my husband will love me. This is Leah, Leah, Lee, remember, the unloved wife. The Lord has looked upon my affliction, for now my husband will love me. She conceived again and bore another son, and said, because the Lord has heard that I am hated, he has given me this son also. This hated could also be replaced again, like it was in verse 31, with unloved, which is arguably a better way to translate. I am hated, he gave me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. The Hebrew name Simeon, in Hebrew, derives from the Hebrew for heard, as Lee indicates here. God heard me, therefore the name is Simeon. There's going to be a lot of wordplay, indifferent, Ghost said. I assume in terms of the previous note. Yeah, possibly. I think that would be fair to say. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I have some mixed emotions about the whole thing, but I think that's totally fair to say. Not about what you said, but about the story in general. So Simeon, 34. Again, she conceived and bore a son and said, now this time my husband will be attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore, his name was called Levi. The origin of the name is not certain. Don't know. It derives from the Hebrew word lewa, I don't know, meaning to attach. You know that one. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, this time, I will praise the Lord. Therefore, she called his name Judah. Then she ceased bearing. Baby factory closed. Judah, as Lee kind of hints there, is derived from the Hebrew word yada, meaning to praise. So all of these are just wordplay on kind of how she's attaching the specific child to her husband and to God. To her husband through God is what she's doing. Then she ceased making babies. Chapter 30. Saying the story is odd, which means it's probably important. Right. I went over it numerous times before tonight. Are you in any other platforms? Yes. I think I gave it to you. I gave it to you, bud. Here. This is on YouTube. Did I spell that right? I can't see. I did. Beautiful. All right. Chapter 30. When Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel is the pretty one. Remember, Rachel is the one Jacob wanted. So far, we've gone over the children of Leah, Leah, Lee. We're now moving to Rachel, she has no children yet. When Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister. She said to Jacob, give me children, or I shall die. Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, I am in the place of God. Jacob considers Rachel's plea irrational, since he views conception as a godly or divine thing, which makes sense and aligns with many other places in the Bible, where and also makes sense with what we just talked about with being barren. They didn't see any of these things as accidents or circumstantial, in many cases even. These things were all divine. So whatever was happening was divine providence. So Leah, Leah, Lee having all these babies is what God wanted, because God did it in Jacob's eyes. Just like a woman who's barren, it's not that maybe she has a medical problem or whatever, any reasonable reason that she can't have babies. It's that she was being punished by God. Period. So Jacob is annoyed with her because Jacob's perspective, which is all that matters, is that she was not meant to have children. And that's why he has Leah Leah, to bear the children. I hope that makes sense. I am in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb. Then she said, here is my servant, Bilhah. I have no idea how to say that one, so just get over it. Go into her, so that she may give birth on my behalf, that even I may have children through her. So just to be abundantly, obnoxiously, disgustingly clear about what's happening, is Jacob is not happening with Rachel. Withheld you in the fruit of the womb. Rachel says to Jacob, because she's not having his babies, Rachel says, hey, remember my female servant that my dad gave me when we got married? Bilyah, I don't know, the B word. Remember my female servant? Make sweet, sweet, tender love to her so that she can give birth on my behalf, which should also remind you of earlier in Genesis, because we've done this before. This is not a new concept. That even I may have children through her. So she gave him her servant, Bilhah. That's what I'm going to say, because that's how it reads in my head. Bilhah, as a wife. There's no way that's right, but that's how I'm going to read it. And Jacob went into her. Jacob made sweet, sweet love to her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, God has judged me and has also heard my voice and given me a son. Therefore, she called his name Dan. Now, the name Dan, I'm going to read this one directly. The name is derived from the Hebrew word meaning to judge, to vindicate, or to contend. In the Hebrew text, Jacob later makes a similar wordplay as Rachel, but does so when speaking of Dan in unflattering terms. And we get there in chapter 49. This negative reputation continues in later texts, through Judges, and there's even a note in Revelation. So when we get to the end of Genesis, Bilhah, is that it? Bilhah. Of all the years I spent paying so much money to go through all this crap, I wish somebody would have taught me how to speak, how to enunciate many of the things. So Bilhah, I assume. So anyways, this is really interesting. And when we get to the end of Genesis, I want to visit the Judges section. I want to revisit chapter 49 in Genesis. And then I want to visit Revelation 7 regarding Dan, because I thought this was interesting. And I'm curious to see where that goes. But that's Dan. Rachel's servant Bilhah, conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, with mighty wrestlings, I have wrestled with my sister and have prevailed. So she called his name, here we go again, y'all, Naphtali. Naphtali? I believe Naphtali. I'm better with the PH words. You said it better, actually. It'd be Bila, right? Bila. I think. Naphtali, I think, whatever. In regards to that name, Rachel is making wordplay in naming Naphtali. His name sounds like the Hebrew word Niftalti, with a T between the L and the I at the end. Niftalti. She uses in this verse to refer to her wrestling or struggling with Leah Leah. Not gonna lie, Bohemian Rhapsody is playing in my head. That's hilarious. No, that's really funny. I'm so glad you're here. You need to come more often. That was nice. Really enjoyed that. Thank you for being here. Okay, so that's that. Verse 9. When Leah Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children, she took to her servant Zilpah. I know it's not P, because they don't do that. Zilpah, whatever, and gave her to Jacob as a wife. So now Leah Leah, who has bore all the children she's going to bear, is like, I'm going to give you my female servant as well, and you are going to put a bunch of babies in her too. this is getting wild if you're keeping count. If you're not keeping count, you're missing out on the juicy details of what we're reading. Then Leah's servant, Zilpah, bore Jacob a son. And Leah said, good fortune has come. So she called his name God. Interesting thing here. The Hebrew word Gad or God, wow, baby war. The Hebrew word God or God can mean troop, like a troop. But it is also the word for luck or good fortune, as it is used in context there. Though there was a god of good fortune in the ancient Near East, mentioned in Isaiah 65, with destiny. Leah refers here to her good fortune, not the deity. However, if you look deep enough, it's interesting to look at this. Because this could be an intentional naming after an ancient Near Eastern god, lowercase g. Would it matter? Would it destroy? No, it doesn't matter. But it's an interesting thing to look at if you care. Gaud. Oh, Gaud. Look if you're weird. If you're weird, look. I have. And I find there to be a relatively strong case for the naming to possibly be in reference to deity. That again, is mentioned in the Bible. It's mentioned in Isaiah 65. Moving on. Leah's servant, Zilpah, bore Jacob a second son. And Leah said, happy am I, for women have called me happy. Wow. So she called his name Asher. Asher is also the Hebrew word for happiness. So this one just makes sense on its face. Verse 14. In the days of wheat harvest, Reuben went and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother, Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, it is a small matter that you have taken away my husband. Is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also? Just super upset about the mandrakes. Mandrakes were believed in the culture to be magical. Truly. Oh my God. You can find a lot on this, actually. They were magical in terms of fertility. So they would be extremely pertinent contextually to what is going on in the story right now. So on its face, reading the Bible without looking deeper into things, this is just weird. It's just a weird exchange between the two. But if you go deeper and you try to dig a little, this is a great example of when you learn, like, oh, that's actually extremely relevant. It's actually wildly relevant. Whereas prior to understanding that, mandrakes have been revered by almost every ancient culture. It makes you wonder. It comes up a lot. All across the board, it comes up a lot. But super good example for if you just read the Bible. You're not reading the Bible. You're reading like a weird story half the time. This would just be a really weird exchange between two ladies about mandrakes until you understand what the mandrakes represent or what their perspective and belief was on the mandrakes. Then you're like, oh, snap. This is wildly pertinent to what is going on. 15. But she said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, I'm rereading now, is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also? Rachel said, then he may lie with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes. What is going on? Wow, having two wives is super dramatic. Having two wives and two female servants and having to sleep with all of them is very dramatic. And then it gets more dramatic. So just hang on. Just hang on. And I want to reread this because I don't want us to miss this. Then he may lie with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes. The plot thickens. When Jacob came from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, you must come in to me, for I have hired you with my son. For, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes. You must come into me. You must have sex with me. For I have hired you with my son's mandrakes. So he lay with her that night, and God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Leah said, God has given me my wages because I gave my servant to my husband. So she called his name Issachar. Can somebody help me on that one? Because I feel like I should know how to say this one, because it's somewhat relevant later. One heck of a pickup line. Mikkel, hey Mikkel. Weekends at the mall with the lady. What can I say, right? At least I got a delicious pumpkin spice coconut milkshake. What? From where? Where does that exist? There's no way I said that correctly. Issachar? The one I'm the least confident about. He's like, no, you nailed it. 19. And Leah conceived again, and she bore Jacob a sixth son. The machine is back open. Then Leah said, God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will honor me, because I have borne him a sixth son. So she called his name Zebulun. Zebulun, right? It's got to be Zebulun. The Hebrew name is Zevulun. So Zevulun, right? Ghost, is that correct? Sounds similar to the Hebrew word Zaval, meaning to honor, which makes sense in context. After she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. Unlike the sons named to this point, daughter doesn't really get any explanation. The rest of them have a reason, right? They're all named, and then there's context added to why the name was the name. With Dinah, there is nothing, but there is something later, so just be patient. Then God remembered Rachel. I love when the Bible says that. Then God remembered this person existed, and God listened to her and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, saying, may the Lord add to me another son. Joseph has two possible origins. The first is to take away, and the second would be to add, which again is why it's so difficult, is that oftentimes when we translate the words, it could be black or it could be white. It depends on more than just you trying to translate that single individual word. May the Lord add to me another son. So contextually, it's even more difficult here because both would apply, right? The Lord has taken away, which is one possible interpretation of the word, to take away. And may the Lord add to me, which is the other interpretation of the name, which would be to add. Both of them make sense. Jacob's prosperity. I think this is our end here. Yeah. Okay. Pumpkin spice coconut milkshake sounds divine. Tastes like Christmas. Good Lord. Did I forget her before? What is the Hebrew word for remember? I wonder. Ghost, I'm sure will hook you up. Did we? No, we didn't go over that today. I think Joseph has a managerial allotment kind of connotation. That's interesting, actually. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm trying to think through all the Josephs right now. That's interesting. I'm going to do some searching when we're done. Jacob's prosperity. As soon as Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, send me away that I may go to my own home and country. Give me my wives and my children. Give me my wives and my children as soon as I can get back to it. What is happening? There we go. You are my wives and my children, for whom I have served you. I have paid the price, and then some, that I may go, for you know the service that I have given you. But Laban said to him, if I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages, and I will give it. Jacob said to him, you yourself know how I have served you, and how your livestock has fared with me. For you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I turned. But now, when I shall provide for my own household also, when shall I provide for my own household also? He said, what shall I give you? Jacob said, you shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again pasture your flock and keep it. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and they shall be my wages. Now, there is something here. Give me my wives and my children. Yeah, give me my wives and my children. The running count that we're at is 11 boys and 1 girl. This is the child counter. This is the Maury counter clock. The 12th son, who is Benjamin, will eventually be born to him later in chapter 35. From these 12 sons, these are the 12 sons that will completely alter Israel. This is the 12 tribes. Then he said, I have learned by divination. This is from Logos. Most translations understand the Hebrew verb used here as a reference to divination, discerning the will of a deity based on using an object, omen, or method. However, in other occurrences in the Old Testament, there is often an explanation of the divination procedure used, but one is not offered here. And it's true. If you look at Genesis 44, 15 through 17, there's an example where it's based on an object, omen, or method that is given in the text that doesn't appear here. The same thing in Leviticus 16, 18 is true, and the same thing in Numbers 5. It's true. So this, in a sense, is an outlier in this very direct and specific context. I like to think of divination as pattern recognition. That does not surprise me at all, and I totally get it. Totally get it. It's all fractal, baby. Patricia said, so 12 tribes, and they are split between 3 women. I feel like those numbers matter somehow, but should research that. Are you talking about the mothers? The 3 women being the mothers? Because of you, so I have learned by divination, the Lord has blessed me because of you. God had blessed Jacob by Abraham, Isaac. Now Jacob's presence is doing the blessing. This has been passed. Name your wages. I thought this was interesting too, so I'm going to read it. Laban does not want Jacob to leave because Jacob has made him wealthy. That much is clear in the text. He asked Jacob the question when he first arrived, if you remember at the beginning of 29, in verse 15. But he has shown himself to be untrustworthy by giving Jacob the wrong sister in the dead of night to sleep with, to instead of Rachel, ugly sister instead of pretty sister. He has been untrustworthy. He will continue to be untrustworthy, even after this point, which will become important later. Sorry, I was just reading something. I like what Ghost just said. If you guys haven't looked, to look. Yes. Okay, 33 is where we left off. So my honesty will answer for me later when you come to look into my wages with you. The Hebrew word used at the beginning of 33 it's a mention of what is just, what is right, what is fair. That is the context. So my honesty is more in reference to justice, fairness, and what is right, righteousness. It is used other places to describe righteousness, which is mostly why they believe that's a better translation of it. The irony here is that Jacob is not an honest man. We know this because of how he got here. So there is an irony to this. My honesty will answer for me later when you come to look into my wages with you. Everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen. Laban said, Good, let it be as you have said. But that day, Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted. Every one that had white on it, and every lamb, everyone that had white on it, and every lamb that was black, and put them in the charge of his sons. And he set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob pastured the rest of Laban's flock. Then Jacob took fresh sticks of poplar and almond and plane trees and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the sticks. He set the sticks that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the throws, that is, the watering places, where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the sticks, and so the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. He is commencing a con as we speak. And Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped, and all the black in the flock of Laban. All the black in the flock of Laban. He put his own droves apart and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob would lay the sticks in the throws before the eyes of the flock, so they might breed among the sticks. But for the feebler of the flock, he would not lay them there, so the feebler would be Laban's, and the stronger would be Jacob's. He's thinning the herd, literally, and he's committing a pretty smart con. Thus the man increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants and male servants, and camels and donkeys. So what 37 through up until you get to chapter 31, it's an expression of basically a relatively high level. Who's Laban again? The dad of the two wives, the dad of the two girls, of Leah, and Rachel. It's daddy, who tricked Jacob into sleeping with Leah, instead of Rachel, which is who Jacob had worked 7 years to get, was Rachel. So then Jacob had to work 14 years to get Rachel because he had already worked 7 and was tricked into taking Leah. That's the dad. Yeah, right. So 37 until you get to chapter 31, verse 37. So you get to chapter 31 is the best way that I can describe this, because it doesn't seem like it if you're just reading it on its face. This is a fairly elaborate and an impressive financial con, which is why the context at the end is important. Thus the man increased greatly. This is in terms of finance. Had large flocks, which is basically money. Female servants, male servants, which is a symbol of status and wealth. Camels and donkeys, which were absolutely symbols of status and wealth. So what this entire section is, it's the explanation. It's like Ocean's 13, biblical style. It's explaining how he duped Laban, and in doing so, he became extremely wealthy. It's like robbing a bank, but back in the day, where you steal a bunch of goats and stuff. And he did that, but he didn't just steal them. It was a very elaborate thing where he thinned the weak ones, kept the strong ones, set up this very naturalistic way to essentially dye their coats so that they would fit what the original deal was, which is that Jacob would take these, and these who had coats that look like this. It's really elaborate. It's really impressive. But in doing so, the important thing is that he became wildly rich, which I feel like is the part that is missed a lot. But it's important, especially because next week he flees. So after you rob a bank, you usually have to flee. And the Bible is more interesting than you think half the time. King, it basically is, because demons aren't all knowing, but they do keep note and they can communicate faster than a thought. according to ex-Satanist. Which ex-Satanist? Like somebody specific? Or just somebody you talk to? That stuff always interests me. The Luciferian people interest me. I've been talking to a few of them, actually, on the social medias, and they've been interesting conversations. Good God. Ugh. All right, let's see. The daughter of, oh, okay, Levi. Interesting. Is it a book? Laban is Rachel's father. Correcto mundo, friend. Yeah, King, is that a book? If it's a book, I would like to read it. I used to read a lot of that stuff. It's been a really long time, though. And by read, I mean listen, so there needs to be an audiobook. Otherwise, there is no hope for me. It would be years before I could actually sit down and read. I think that stuff's interesting, though. The most interesting part being the explanation of description for me, for a lot of them. Speckled, the meaning of pale, regarding the pale horse in Revelation, it doesn't mean green, at least in my opinion. I missed that. Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think there's one I watched the video I can put in the Discord. Yeah, if you put, I would, yeah, if you could do that, that'd be great. I would be curious. It's a good story. Interesting story. Very interesting story. That was a great lesson God taught Jacob right there. The con man got conned. Divine justice to Esau. And in the end, all worked out for the whole family. Right. At least so far. At least so far. Looking at the 12 tribes, looks like all the sons bore children, but the daughter, didn't. What the... Start a whole thing if we get into that. I want to say it's in... somewhere down here. Here you go. 34. I was gonna say, I was looking at some of this earlier today. 34, the daughter of Leah, whom she had born to Jacob, went out to see the woman of the land. We get a little bit more here. And I think it'll answer at least some of the questions of like what happens to her. But if you think about kind of what you just said, looking at the 12 tribes, looks like the sons bore children, but the daughter, Dinah, didn't. Does that really surprise you though? Like with no opinion, just like aggregate the data in the Bible. Is it super surprising? Considering the greater context of the meaning of the individual specifically. In the more immediate context, I find it really odd. So I agree with your questioning of it. It's odd for any woman in the Old Testament or the New Testament, really, but the Old Testament specifically, to not bear children because of what we were talking about earlier. Like that was it was the thing you did if you were a woman in any early culture. Bearing children is what you did. We had to. We wanted more people. Like there needed to be more people. Everybody was warring. There needed to be people. Building societies had to happen. So it's a super important thing. So it was odd, which is why it was seen as such a disgrace if you did not have children, even if it was not your fault. So on that hand, I agree with you. And I do find it odd and interesting. But in the greater context of the 12 tribes, I could think of a few kind of odd reasons for why that would be. Well, and it only mentions in my study Bible that the sons of the 12 tribes had, the daughters aren't mentioned. So blah. Right, which is like the easiest answer that might not satisfy you is that it didn't matter. I don't think that, to be super clear. I think it matters. But in like from the perspective of the authors, I could see that it would be seen as less relevant, especially when contrasted with the immediate context, which would be like the 12 tribes. In a different context, maybe it would be seen as more relevant. But even then, like, it was just a different time is a part of the truth. But it doesn't mean it's the reason. But it's something like we have to just be honest about. It was less relevant. What was happening with women and their lineage was just less relevant, if not through the perspective of the man, because it was just a different time. If we were writing history today, it wouldn't be like that. Guaranteed, it wouldn't be like that. But, this isn't that. I find it very unsatisfactory too, just to be clear. One of them, Asher, says 5 children, unspecified. Right. Because the children are only relevant in context of the father. So if the father is not relevant, or if the father is not mentioned, the children and the wife in the New or in the Old Testament are irrelevant. We don't have to like it. I don't like it. Those children, what if some of them are boys and they go on to do super important stuff? It would have been nice to know more. But it was just a different culture. Sadly. Shows how dishonesty can come full circle. Yeah, isn't that funny? I love some of these stories. I find them very interesting. Patricia says, grr. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I totally sympathize. I find it frustrating also. Because I would just like to have the context. I'm like a context junkie with this stuff. And anytime the authors leave out context, that even if it's not wildly important, it is important. And us not having it is extremely frustrating. It's super frustrating. Jesus Christ. It's good stuff either way, though. I think you'll like with some of the other apocryphal stuff that we read. There in many of them, there's a much more broad emphasis on women and kids in some of them, but predominantly women. I will warn everyone: the story is not suitable for children. Are we talking about the Bible or the satanic thing? Talking about both, probably. Go said, think of all the people not mentioned in Christ's lineage. The vast majority, only the direct line to him is relevant, at least to the narrative. I don't know. Right. The tree I'm looking at says daughter with no name, unspecified. I mean, I get both sides. I get both ends. I mean, what Ghost said is obviously totally true. And what Patricia's upset about is like these people, they're being mentioned. So if you're going to mention them, just mention them. I feel like you could add just enough. Just enough. But it's just not the way it was. It's just not the way it was. We don't have to like it. It just is what it is. It is what it is. But I feel like if you're going to take the time to mention that they existed, instead of putting daughter, you could put their name. You could put a name, at the very least. But if you're going to put their name, you might as well put something. But the truth is, like, it's just hard to say. It's hard to say. Did they do anything relevant to the story? Were any relevant actions taken? But I would also venture to say there were probably men who were mentioned in the Bible who were also irrelevant, but they got mentioned because they were men. It was a different time. It was a different time. The narrative. The video I sent you or put on Discord. Okay, cool. Yeah. I will watch that. I always love that stuff. Is it super long? Whoa. The Black Pope? The story behind the mysterious death of the most powerful Satanist. The most powerful. Dinah is one daughter mentioned in Genesis 30:21. Right, there were a few. There were a few that were mentioned by name. And that's the one I have up now, is that she's mentioned further in 34. So we read the portion about her in 30. And what I was trying to show Patricia is like we get more from her. And it's a decent amount. We get a whole chapter. For the most part, we get a whole chapter in relation to that daughter. So it's not that they weren't relevant at all. It's just last. Some of it had to do with just culture. That's how it was. Some of it was because they were literally doing less relevant things than what is relevant to the specific thing we're reading, which says nothing about importance. It's just in reference to relevance, which are two entirely separate things. Totally separate things. This looks interesting, King. So yeah, I'm gonna look at that later. At some point, and then I gotta go. I just gotta go. But at some point soon. Oh, by the way, so it's really here. There, it's better. We talked about doing Tuesday nights for the open topic thing, which, if you are unaware, if you go to Off Topic and you go to Threads and you go to Tuesday Topic Ideas, this is where you can put them. And as you guys put them in here, I'm moving them to the top so that we can just make a poll out of these and you guys can pick and then we can do it. All that being said, it probably won't start this Tuesday because it's on such short notice, but my schedule wildly shifts tomorrow. And that's kind of what I've been waiting for because I don't know how that's going to turn out. So by the end of this week, I should know what my schedule actually is. And Thursday night, the time might need to move back. I'm not sure yet. If it moves back, we'll start Tuesday next week and it will be at the same time. So if we have to start moving Thursday to 7 or 8 p.m. Central Time and we start Tuesday, it'll have to be at 7 or 8 p.m. Central Time, just to be clear. But I haven't forgotten, and I still fully intend on us doing that. I've just been waiting for my schedule to change, which starts tomorrow. And then I will have a better idea of what the hell my life is going to look like. Because right now it is unclear. Ghost said it's important to keep in mind this was written down well after the events occurred. So it is the bullet points version, not an exhaustive retelling. Right, that is important to know. Because I feel like a lot of things that are left out weren't left out on purpose. Some of them definitely were, but not all of them. I think a lot of things just like nobody remembers. Nobody knew. So especially in context to like people who weren't specifically relevant to the story, maybe they literally didn't remember their name. That is a possibility. It's not an excuse, but it's possible. Patricia said, what is a good book of the Bible that addresses addiction, overcoming addiction? Oh, girl, you and I can talk. You and I can talk about that. I would say there's none, though, is the honest answer. There's no book of the Bible that addresses like addiction, but there are tons of good sections and snippets of the Bible that I can help you with. Drug addict extraordinaire over here, former drug addict extraordinaire. I have tons of stuff I can send you. Prefer 7 p.m. Central Time, but if it's 8 p.m. Central Time, then I won't be able to probably stay the whole time. I know 8 p.m. Central Time for me is super late, so I will avoid that at all costs. Trust me on that. Yeah, so the end, and then I really got to go. The end all be all plan. Or projection, I guess, is Tuesday. My truck got fixed. Yeah. The flashlight prison adventure couldn't happen because the truck broke down. So on our last possible night to go out together for the foreseeable future of what will probably be a couple of years, realistically, the truck breaks down on the way to the final date. And I can't say the rest yet, but it was just not ideal. It was unfortunate. Would it be possible to send tonight? Hubby is asking. Yes, I'll get that for you. The plan is Tuesday and Thursday, whether it be 6 or 7 p.m. Central Time. Tuesday would be the open topic. Thursday would be the Apocrypha that we already do. And then Sunday would stay the same at 6 p.m. You have to tell us what a flashlight prison adventure is. I will let Kat tell everybody what a flashlight prison adventure is because I have post-traumatic stress disorder. And I need to not talk about it for my mental health. That's what people say in 2024, right? I had to push the truck off the road despite my condition. That's what he means, y'all. Well, I wasn't going to bring up your condition. But now that you have, I'm going to get off. So I love you all very much. Have a great night. Patricia, I will pull that up on my phone right now so I don't forget as I get ready to go pass out. But I'll send you some stuff right now. Love you guys. Love you guys. Love you guys. Have a wonderful